Okay, hi everyone. Thank you for coming today. Let me get uh, my slides up because I did prepare some slides. Here we go. If it's going to connect and do what I need it to do right now. Yay! So just before we get stuck into the juicy bits and in the spirit of reconciliation, I'd like to acknowledge the Whadjuk Noongar people as the traditional custodians of the country that I am on and the traditional custodians throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. I'd like to pay our respects to the elders past, present and emerging and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. So who am I? You guys have signed up to come and spend an hour with me to listen to my story, but do you know who I am? Well, I think, I start out with I'm a wife, a mum, a daughter, a sister, a friend, and a speechy. I am also a business owner, and in the reflection of this whole putting this together, I really, really looked at, well, how many hats do you really need to be a business owner? What are all the things that you need to do in order for a business to be successful, from whether it's brand new as a sole trader or branching out into diversifying income in different ways. So the hats are numerous, and we'll go through some of those today. In the course of today, I am going to share with you some of my early life and my childhood days and leading up to my uni days, and then from there looking at my early career. And I think the reason why I'm going all the way back to my childhood is because a lot of what my life experience in my childhood has led me to have a way of thinking that is helping me with my business at the moment. And so I wanted to go all the way back because I think it's important to, when you are reflecting on your ownership of a business and your journey, that you don't just think of it in the here and now, and you think about what is the life experience that has led you to this point that you can use in your business. And you might not even realize that you are, but hopefully after today you'll see that there's a whole lot of life experience that goes into running a business. Okay. So, early years. This is me. This is baby Di, and I was born in 1984. So if you do the maths quickly, you'll recognize that I am now 40. Oh. So I had my 40th in September last year, and in the process, my beautiful mum and dad, they put together a photo album for me last year for my 40th. And mum gave me a USB of all of the photos that she got. So these are photos that she has had in her storage and scanned and put into my photo album, as well as photos from friends and family around the world for many years. So I'm very thankful that mum gave me that USB, because it was very easy to find photos of me for this event. So I was born and raised in Zimbabwe, not here in Australia. And yeah, you probably can get a little bit of that on my accent. My family lived on a farm, and my grandfather had bought that farm and had brought it up from the ground level to being, a great, incredibly successful business. My dad took over the business when he was really young, after my grandfather passed away. And mum and dad ran that business right through until, fraught times in 2002, and I'll get to that in a minute. My primary school years were absolutely just blissful years. Our school community was incredible, and it life was idyllic in hindsight. At the time, probably didn't realize how incredible it was, but it really was idyllic. We had the best of beautiful environment. The school that I was at had its very own little game park, and we would go and do school camps in our own camp backyard. We had wildlife, not dangerous wildlife, but we had a lot of wildlife in that game park, from giraffe to various different types of antelope and small animals, and just wow, incredible, incredible place. Um, and even in primary school, for our school camps, we actually did go to places that had wild animals, and I had experiences of seeing lions out in the wild, and having to stop in our tracks so that a herd of elephants could pass in front of the group of children, 44 children. That was an interesting experience. So if anybody's ever wanting the full story of that later on, let me know. I'm happy to share that experience, that story. As time went on and into high school years, the political turmoil in the country became much more fraught, and as well as challenges. Actually, I think I've got some high school photos here as well. Yeah, there's some great high school photos. In our the political turmoil definitely played a really big part in how life proceeded in my high school years. There was a lot of upheaval, and the government determined that farmland was no longer could no longer be used by the people who had bought the farms, whether they were white or black. But at that point in time, it was mostly about white farmers. And we were given a number of orders to leave our farm, and we would be evicted from our land. My parents fought that quite significantly in the early part of that time, which was in the late 90s, between 98 and 2000. And they were successful in that bid to begin with. But heading into 2002, which was also my final year of school, we weren't so lucky. And we ended up having to leave our beautiful home. And this photo in the middle here is our beautiful home that my grandfather built on these massive rocks. And we had to leave under duress, really, and kind of skimming over, but we ultimately, after 3 days of moving some personal belongings out of the family home, we left in the dead of night without lights on the vehicles, so that they didn't know that we had left. And that was really fighting for our lives, to be honest. We had other people who had not left quite on time, and they had really even much worse traumatic situations happen to them, being barricaded in their homes, having their homes set on fire whilst they were in it, and various other things. So very thankfully, I will always be really grateful to my parents, who my dad always said that our number one priority was that our family always sticks together. And where some other farmers would send the wife and the children out and the farmer would stay and fight, my dad wasn't prepared to do that, and we all left together. And, you know, that has always been an ethos that our family have lived by, that we always stick together. And I'm very grateful that Dad did that. And, you know, now Mum and Dad, they live 10 minutes down the road from us here in Perth. So And we're still sticking together through tough times and through good times. I think as I look through these photos, part of our lives in Zimbabwe, especially through the late 90s, early 2000s, it wasn't really easy to get basic commodities of food and fuel. And one of the things that we always had to be incredibly resourceful to be able to, sometimes it sounds, it kind of, at the time you don't even realize it, but in hindsight, just to survive. And when I was looking back through these photos, one of the things that I noticed is, so if you look at this photo of me here with this bright, always wearing bright colors, that has never changed. But this dress, and if I look at the photos of every other school dance that I ever went to, I made my dress. I made my dress every single time. So yes, this dress I made. Mum was an incredible seamstress, and she always helped me to sew my own dresses. But what else does that tell me about us? What does it tell us? Well, that we are incredibly resourceful, and that has continued on. Mum also taught me how to decorate cakes. She used to do wedding cakes, and I went on and did a few wedding cakes myself as well. Mum taught me how to arrange flowers. All of the flowers at my wedding were arranged by my aunt and friends, and oh, they were just spectacular. So besides, like Mum always taught me to do so many different things. It wasn't a case of, oh, we don't know how to do that, let's get somebody to do that for us, because there wasn't somebody to do that for us. We had to figure out how to do it for ourselves. That has been a really, really big and important part of my adult life as well. Moving on, so like I said to you, we got evicted from our farm in 2002. That was my final year of school, and in Zimbabwe at that time, we were doing A-levels through Cambridge University in the UK. Now, not surprisingly, I didn't do amazing in my A-level exams. Now, you could put it down to maybe there was a bit of trauma involved in why I wasn't able to study very well. Or you could have put it down to the fact that I was having a lot of fun. I was playing a lot of sport. I was in the school play. I was probably doing anything I could to get out of studying. That just is how it is. But at the same time, in hindsight, I do recognize that studying was really hard because I couldn't actually think. I couldn't retain much information. And the time when I was studying for my final exams was also the time that my parents were moving a lot of stuff off of our farm. They'd been given access for 2 days to get as much stuff off the farm as possible. And that was absolutely traumatic. I wasn't allowed to go back. And I'm thankful for that, because I get to imagine and think about it in the way that it was when it was beautiful. But it was still traumatic and still a really, really stressful time. So not surprising that I couldn't study as well, and also makes me really think about, what the impact of trauma can have on learning, and brings that, that all just comes back into what I do today. I finished school, and a couple of months later, I moved to the UK and I went on a gap year. A family friends of ours took me in, and these people were absolutely amazing, so generous. Their daughter, who was the same age as me, she moved out of her room. She slept on the lounge room floor so that I could have her bedroom and have privacy and a space to be. My host mum also got me a job working as an admin person in the real estate agency she worked in. And it was actually at that place that the real estate agent, who was a British lady, she turned to us one day and said, "What is it with you Zimbabweans? You always say, we'll make a plan. We'll make a plan. Anytime there's something comes up, you say, we'll make a plan. What is with that?" And that had both of us stumped. But it is because, as I said before, had to be so resourceful in Zimbabwe. We had to be resourceful in finding bread, in finding milk, in finding petrol, in finding vegetables, and finding basic food and commodities to get through. And so we had just adopted the saying, make a plan, and we used it for everything. And I still use it to this day. I might not say make a plan all the time, but in my mind, I'm always there thinking, okay, I need to make a plan. What is my plan going to be? What am I going to do to get myself out of this sticky situation? And it can be a simple sticky situation like tonight. The kids have got, one child has to be at T-ball practice and the other child is performing in a school barbecue concert, and they've both got to be at two different places at the same time. And so make a plan. That comes back in all the time. I've just realized how I'm waffling on about this, so I'll try and speed things up a little bit because there's a lot more to get to. I finished my gap year in the UK. That was a really tough year and also incredible at the same time. Mum and Dad decided to move to New Zealand when I was doing that gap year. And so at the end of 2003, I went back to Zimbabwe for a really short stint, basically to help Dad pack up the container. And then we moved to New Zealand. I met my husband the very first day that we arrived in New Zealand, and I barely remember it. So I'm sorry. He said it was love at first sight. I can't say the same because I was just so excited. He was friends with my childhood friends who had moved to New Zealand a few years before us. And I was just so excited to see my friends again that I didn't even realize that there was a boy in the room. Anyway, I'm a bit of a slow learner from that point of view, but we did get together about 6 months later, and that is over 20 years ago. We just celebrated our 15th wedding anniversary. So there you go. In 2004, we still didn't have permanent residency in New Zealand. So I wasn't able to live and work. Well, I was able to live there, but I wasn't able to work there because I was under a student permit. I actually going to go back to the beginning of 2004. I had applied to do a bridging course at a university there. And I was told that I had to enroll for the year-long bridging course for students, for international students, because I was coming in as an international student. I didn't have permanent residency, and therefore, because I had been schooled outside of New Zealand, it must have been in a language other than English. And so I needed to do the bridging course that was a year long, that was basic English instruction. This didn't sit and I didn't take no for an answer. So I went into the university and I argued my case, and they still made me prove that I had done all of my schooling in English, despite the fact that my qualifications that I had from Zimbabwe were actually English Cambridge University grades. That didn't matter. Anyway, cut a long story short, I fought for it and I got into the 6-month program that was for Kiwi kids. And for the first time in my life, I aced it. I was actually good at something, and I wonder just how the impact of just living in this land of milk and honey. New Zealand was absolutely chalk and cheese different to Zimbabwe. I was shocked when I got there, and people didn't have gates on their properties and they didn't have fences. It's a bit like here, they don't have gates and fences. You can walk straight off the street and up to somebody's front door. You can't do that in Zimbabwe. And so that was just the stress levels. You could walk into any shop and there was bread and milk abundantly. In fact, multiple varieties that you could choose from. That was confusing. And so I think, you know, the combination of just feeling a lot more relaxed and also doing something that I enjoyed at uni in that course meant that I could do really well in it. And that gave me entrance into the Bachelor of Speech and Language Therapy program, which I started in 2005. Did have a stint back in the UK for 6 months because I wasn't about to sit around and wait for 9 months between finishing one course and starting the next and not being able to work. I'm not, those of you who know me, not really one for sitting around and waiting for things to happen around me. I kind of need to keep going and keep doing stuff. And uni, I mean, these are some of the photos of my time in this one over here was the time in the UK where I made some wonderful Kiwi friends, and we all went to the rugby dressed like this, and that was a great time. At the start of uni, I decided to organise a group of us to go rowing. I've never done rowing in my life before, but I heard about these university games and thought, oh, that sounds like fun. I want to go rowing. Somehow, with no connections and anything in a new country, I managed to organise a crew of people to get together. Some of these were in my speechy course and some were from other places. We found ourselves a coach who had connections to a boat club, and every morning at 4 a.m. for 6 weeks, we drove an hour to this boat club, did 2 hours of training, drove back and then went to uni, and then went and competed, and we didn't come last. We came second last, and I'm still proud of that because we were up against universities who had years and years and years of training behind them. So you know, that is kind of the thing that I'm kind of known for is I want something, I go and get it. The following year, we weren't allowed to compete in rowing anymore because we'd done one competition. So I scratched that and we made an ultimate frisbee team. I didn't even know that that was a sport, but it sounded like fun, and it was. We had so much fun up against, again, teams that were super serious, and we were not. We were just there to have a lot of fun. I wanted to go to the university games because it sounded like fun, so I made sure that happened. And, you know, I still do that to this day. I was looking for a book club a couple of years ago, and I couldn't really find one that fit with the idea that I may or may not read the book, but really I just wanted to chat to some other people. So I made one, and we're still catching up every couple of months. Last year, not so good, but this year we've got going to be better, promise. I finished uni, and actually Andre and I got engaged, and this is a photo of our engagement party with a beautiful bunch of friends. And we got engaged at the end of my 3rd year of uni, and then at the end of 4th year, just after finishing uni, we moved to Australia. We had got another New Zealand citizenship not that long before. Wasn't the intention to jump ship straight away, but that's how it worked out. And we moved here, and this was the Australia Day Skyworks that used to happen here in Perth, and that was only 3 weeks after we had arrived, and it was just such a celebration. How fun to be in this place, and there were so many people. It was fireworks and all sorts that night. It was just a lot of fun. I found this yesterday, this little thing here that says, I got a job. Because one of the things is that we moved to Australia. I had literally just finished uni. I didn't have any experience as a speechy at all. And when I moved here, I got in touch with Speech Pathology Australia, and they decided that I had to do the full application to get membership rather than the mutual recognitions. Now, this was despite the fact that my university was accredited by SPA, and we were assessed on Compass just the same as every Australian student was. I still had to jump through those hoops. I had to spend, I think it was $1,000 for that application, which was a lot of money, and I'll explain how much money that really was in a second. But we arrived in Australia on the 5th of January. The day before we arrived, Meekatharra mine, which is where my father-in-law was working, got closed down. And the week before we actually left New Zealand, the job that my husband had lined up was rescinded. And we arrived right slap bang into the 2009 GFC, where engineers, despite his experience, were no longer sought after. And apparently it was easier to get a job as a speech pathologist without membership to SPA and without any experience than it was for an experienced engineer to get a job here. It was really trying time. And actually, by the time I got my first paycheck, as I got paid before my husband did, we had $100 left. I mean, we were really lucky that we were staying with family. But, you know, when you are down to, we literally spent every last cent on moving, on paying that $1,000 to Speech Pathology Australia just to get the you can now apply for membership, not even actually the membership. It was really, really a really tough time. So although it was so fun that we were here, it was also incredibly hard. And, you know, I look back, that job, by the way, these people in this photo here are the beautiful people that I happened to get to work with. And they were my saviors. I was, you know, in a new country, in a new profession, new career, and I knew nobody here. And these people all took me under their wing, and they taught me a lot about providing therapy services. They taught me about speech therapy, but I also worked with OTs and physios there. And they also taught me, we did lots of social things together. So they were absolutely a lifeline for me. And I did, just lost my train of thought for a second. In the course of this year, I did go back to New Zealand for my graduation. Very proud of my graduation and very proud that I could stand here in this photo with my grandfather. Granddad immigrated from Zimbabwe to New Zealand just after we left at the age of 90. Now, it was hard enough for me to immigrate at the age of 25. Granddad did it at the age of 90. He moved across the seas, and I wonder so much about where I get my can-do attitude from, but it's kind of, there's a sign right there. I'm also very thankful to have had this time with Granddad, and he was so incredibly proud of me and told me all the time that this was the last time that I got to spend with Granddad. Besides a very quick goodbye right at the end for him in August of that year. He didn't make it to our wedding, but he was there for my graduation, and I'm so thankful that we got to spend that time together. Not long after this, and through some unbelievably hard work of saving, we were able to buy our first block of land. Now, once again, I decided not to take no for an answer. The first bank that we applied to said no. And also, why would a bank actually want to fund us? We had no credit rating. We didn't have a credit card at that point in Australia. In fact, we didn't even have one at all in New Zealand. We just didn't have one. We had no credit rating whatsoever. We had no trace, and we were young kids essentially with having been in jobs for maybe 6 months. And here we were asking for a loan for a house and land. But never mind, that wasn't going to deter me. I fought and eventually, fourth loan later, we got an approval to buy the land, the most ridiculous interest rate that we could have got at the time. But it didn't matter because it was a starting point. And sometimes you have to take the bad to get the good. And that is exactly what we did there. So that was all in the space of 1 year. 2009 was a really, really big year for us. I'm going to skip quite a bit now through the next little while because there's some important things that happened over the next little while, but I'm also keeping an eye on the time. And I know you guys aren't just here to listen to the back end of the time. You want to hear about what's happened in the private practice more recently. We got married in 2010. We went back to New Zealand for that, and that was fabulous. We had family fly in from all around the world to share that special time with us. And PowerPoint has managed to put these photos in random order. But anyway, this house here is the house that we built, and we moved into that house about 6 months after we got married. So that was incredible. I got this got sacked dot point sitting here. This was a time in my career that was really tough. So my first job, I mentioned those people were an absolute savior. They were a lifeline, and they really, really were. I have to say that the requirements on me as a new graduate therapist were incredibly high. I would never wish this on anyone. I had a starting caseload of 75 children, and those children would be lucky. The lucky ones, I got to see them once a term, and some of those families I met twice in the year that I was working there. What impact could I have on those families? It was really trying, and there were some other things that I really disliked. I was asked to photocopy assessment forms to be used when I wanted to do assessments. These are copyright assessment forms, and I refused. I said, no, that's against copyright, against the law, against ethics, and not something that I'm going to stand by and do. I think they were a bit surprised that I just said no, because, I was a new grad and they'd done me a favor in getting me a job when I didn't have all the credentials ready. But I wasn't about to put that in front of my ethics and my beliefs that, the law, copyright law, I wasn't about to do that. So there were a couple of things that made me start looking for a role elsewhere. And then the opportunity came up for me to join a private practice where I would get experience in literacy. Now, this has always been a passion of mine. My mum is a teacher, and she taught children with dyslexia back in Zimbabwe. And so literacy has always been in my psyche and part of what I've wanted to do as a speech therapist. But as you guys probably know, not something that's taught at uni. So I saw this as a really wonderful, incredible opportunity to learn more about literacy from somebody who was a guru in the field. And I jumped at it. And just shortly after our wedding, I started that job. Unfortunately, after only, I think it was 6 weeks, maybe eight at the most, I was sacked from that job. There's no easy way or light way of saying that I got sacked. I was absolutely distraught. I was told the reason for it is that I wasn't pulling my weight. I wasn't able to see the number of clients that they wanted me to see, and that I didn't have the skill set to be able to do so. I wasn't actually given the chance, which was really made me feel really angry that they said that I didn't have the skill set, but I wasn't given the chance. I was given 2 clients of my own in that whole time. And based on that, they decided that I didn't have the skill set that they needed, and so sent me on my way. I will say that 3 weeks later, I got an email from one of the team there who told me that the whole practice had been shut down 3 weeks later. So in hindsight, I can see that it wasn't me and it wasn't my fault, despite what they were trying to tell me that it was. But that doesn't mean that it was in a really, really low time. I picked myself up as best as I could, and I applied for some more roles. And then I had this situation where I had 3 places offering me a position, and I had to choose between 3 different places. Anyway, so I picked one, and to this day, I wonder, did I pick the right one? But anyway, that's where my career went. So then I started in my 3rd job in the space of about a year, just over a year of working as a speechie. I was now in my 3rd job. That job also didn't go according to plan. I was intending to be a speech therapist there. Newsflash, I trained as a speech therapist, employed as a speech therapist, basically worked as a childcare worker, educator, doing a lot of changing nappies, and wiping faces and snotty noses and getting really sick in the process because of snotty noses. And anytime I did make communication suggestions for these kiddies, it was declined, and I was told that that wasn't what they were going to do. I stuck with that job for quite a long time, more than a year, because I had the sense that, as I said before, 3rd job in 12 months in a new career, that if I try to go for another job, they would just think I didn't have any sticking power, and why would they want to hire somebody that was already looking for their 4th job in a really short space of time. Anyway, so I stuck it out despite it being pretty awful. And then had an amazing connection with somebody at a training event, and that led me into getting a role, one of my favorite jobs that I've had in my career, besides running my business, which was working as a speechie in the early years team at the Disability Services Commission, as it was called back then. That was incredible. I got to work in a key worker model with a multidisciplinary team, and I learned so much about all different aspects. And it was in that role that I really learned about the whole child and the whole family and the whole community, and how all of that has a really big impact on that one tiny little speech goal that you have. That job led to learning so much about disability. It led to connections and contacts, and there's some people who are joining in on this today that or are going to be able to watch the recording that I met in that process, in that journey. And that was a really, really special time, and definitely defining in terms of how I work today and how I do things with my clients and in my business. Just quickly, couple of minor little things, little baby things, was a couple of babies. So when I was working at Disability Services Commission, I had my first little boy, Joshy. He was born in 2013, and he has just turned 11 back in September. I took some mat leave from my job there, and whilst I was on mat leave, NDIS was kicking off. And whilst some of us might be quite thankful for the NDIS kicking off, it meant a really big change for how disability services were dealt with in WA. And our team at DSC had a major restructure. So the permanent position that I'd fought so hard to get was now taken away, and I had to fight for a 0.5 position, which I was successful in getting, thank goodness. And so I was able to go back there after maternity leave and work there in a part-time capacity. And I did that for another year before I, like I said, met connections. I met a lady who ran a private practice where her sole work was with complex communication and using AAC systems with kids with who were non-speaking and various complexities in terms of their disabilities. She needed somebody to cover her mat leave, and I was really looking for something else, something different and something challenging. And so I decided to take that role. And wow, what a learning curve. What a learning curve. There were so many things. So all of a sudden I was now on my own. I had her for a short time before she went on mat leave, but then, you know, she had a baby and it was her second baby and she needed that time with her family, which was exactly why I was there. So I was on my own, basically sole trader type situation, and I was learning a lot about AAC. I thought I knew stuff about AAC. I did not know nearly enough. So I learned a lot. I learned a lot about scheduling appointments and cancelling and rescheduling and doing invoicing. And I didn't have to track if the payments came in, but I had to send out the invoices, and a lot of aspects of running a private practice. I got to actually have that opportunity to do that whilst it wasn't actually my private practice, and I was being paid as an employee. So how amazing and how fortunate was that? At the end of that year, I had my little boy, Caleb. So he has just turned 8 or so in September. We're all September babies, except for my husband. September's a busy time for us. And my boys have taught me so much about life, about they're the best teachers about learning about children's development, about brain types, about parenting, about reflecting on your own beliefs about the world. And in 2015, we moved house and moved into Rolling Stone, into this beautiful house here, which is where we are still. So the day that I left on my last day of working at the private practice, I came up with my business name and tagline for my new business that wasn't even registered yet. I decided it was going to be called Perth Hills Speech Pathology, and the tagline was going to be taking communication to new heights. So that's a little bit different to what it is at the moment. But I really wanted to encompass that, the idea that speech pathologists don't just work on stuttering. Essentially, I wanted for people to see straight away that we're talking about communication. And so that's why I decided to go with this. I had somebody help me design my logo. And so there's a few little things that have you might be able to see in my logo. There's a speech bubble, there's the hills because we're in the hills, and there's two faces talking to each other with the road driving up the hills up to the new heights. So that's all the background around my logo and where that all came from. And in 2007, in June of 2007, I opened my doors, but I was completely mobile. So Caleb was 7 months old, and between January and June of that year, I got everything in the back end of the business running. So the BTS, behind the scenes, whilst also being a mummy to a baby who was not particularly easy peasy, didn't like feeding very much at all, and a 3-year-old. And I designed my website. The only thing that I had somebody else do for me was design the logo. That was it. Everything else in starting up the business, everything else, I didn't even get a loan from the bank. I did absolutely everything myself. From designing these worksheets, I didn't have ChatGPT back then to help me with wording. Man, that would have been so helpful. I determined when I was going to work, what type of kids I was going to see. I did all of the marketing. I started up my Facebook page and helped people. I asked people to share it amongst those people that they knew. And then when I got my very first inquiry, it was for a child who was diagnosed with CAS, childhood apraxia of speech. And this is one area that I had absolutely no experience in whatsoever. And so I said, I'm sorry, I can't help you. Now that was, that was really hard. This was my very first inquiry, and my husband thought I was barking mad. But I was absolutely determined that I wasn't going to be taking money from people and not knowing what I was doing. And I referred them to somebody else. That mum, I later became friends with her in the community, and she said she will always refer people to me because I took the time to talk and listen to her situation and not to just take on her child when I couldn't do the work. And she did. She referred many, many, many people to me. So actually, maybe it worked out in the end. I started with working just on Saturdays because that would mean that my husband could be home with the kids and I didn't have to think about childcare for the boys. But we very quickly, probably within a couple of months, we realized that that wasn't working for our family. My husband was working full time, and then I would go and work on Saturdays, and then we would be scrambling on Sundays just to try and capture a little bit of time together as a whole family. And as I mentioned, really back early days, family has always been a really high priority in my life with what my parents did for us, but with my kids as well. That family time has always been really high priority. So we quickly realized that that wasn't going to work. And so we did a couple of things. We enlisted the grandparents, so mum and dad. Dad then retired, so that was really handy because then it meant that we could actually have some time where the boys could be with their grandparents, and that was really special. And as I got busier, we also enrolled the boys into, actually, Josh was already going to daycare some days in the week, but as Caleb got closer to the 12-month mark, we enrolled him in daycare as well. And I very quickly went from doing 3 hours on a Saturday morning to, within the space of a year, I was working 2.5 days just back to back with clients and then squeezing admin in late at night. After the kids had gone to bed, I would go back to my desk and I would work and work and work. And usually that was not just note writing, that was also updating the website, updating Facebook, updating, doing all of my invoicing, my banking, zero reconciliations. Can't even think of all the different things, all of those many, many hats of business that were happening. That is what I was doing between the hours of 8 and often at 11, 11:30, 12, and then the boys would be up again at 5. And I did that for a good couple of years, I reckon. Josh started 3-year-old kindy and then kindy 3 days a week. When he was at kindy 3 days a week, I would just jam pack work into the school hours. And then once the kids were back in bed, that's when I would do all of the admin. And I operated like that for a number of years. I did all of it, every little aspect of the business I did myself. I almost can't even recall all the different types of jobs that I was doing at that time, but they were all there. All of the late of night. And sometimes I look back at some of the work I did at that time and go, Oh yeah, you can see that you were operating with very little sleep. So yes, these are some of the things that I did. I started a weekly focus on my social media where I would do a theme of the week. And this was to try and drum up social media presence and therefore referrals. And before I knew it, I was fully booked and I had more referrals than I could deal with, and I had a wait list. That was really stressful. I found that when I moved to needing to have a wait list, I found the wait list incredibly stressful. Wow, amazing that I had got to the point in such a short space of time that I was able to have a wait list and have a full caseload of clients. But also, every single person I spoke to had a story around why their family needed a speech therapist. And there weren't very many around. There were a couple of other private practices in our district, and they were also full. And it was really, really hard for people to get in places. And I made the mistake early on of saying to somebody, I think it'll be about 3 months before I get to see you. No, that wasn't the case. And 3 months came and 3 months went, and 6 months came and 6 months went. And I still hadn't got round to actually being able to see this client. And that really taught me a big lesson that whenever, even to this day, we put somebody on our wait list, we never give a time frame because we just don't know how long a client is going to be with us on our current caseload. It's really hard to predict. And in private practice, it's even harder to predict than elsewhere. You don't know when clients are going to suddenly have to leave because something else has come up. And suddenly you've been working with a client and it's been 3 years. And you anticipated that they were just coming in because they had difficulty with a lateral lisp. And now they've got a diagnosis of autism and ADHD and language difficulties that go along with that. And you thought you were going to only see them for 6 weeks. No, I never thought I was going to only see somebody for 6 weeks. That was an exaggeration. In the early parts of my time, I also started running some workshops. So trying to upskill parents in interactions with their kids and trying to do that through our community centre in Roleystone. I was mobile, so I got my car done up with this big screen on the background. I never got a single referral off all the money that I spent on this big sign. Not a single one. So when I got my new car a few years after this, I didn't bother to replace it. That was, money that didn't really go to anything. This kind of thing on the socials, this is the kind of thing that got me referrals. And word of mouth was probably the biggest one. I also did work. So initially with my website, oh gosh, I'm really running out of time here. With my website, I built it all using a platform. I can't remember. I think it was something like GoDaddy, something similar to that. The problem with that was that when I got to the point where I wanted somebody else to run my website or to help me with the back end of the website updates and things like that, or to do big updates on my website, nobody else could use that platform unless I gave them those logins, and web designers weren't keen on it. So I had to then make the decision to move my website to a WordPress website. And I knew nothing about WordPress. So I somehow, in one of the small business communities that I was in, this lady popped up saying that she was starting her portfolio and she'd really like to work on a few people's websites. So I grabbed this opportunity, and for a very small, I think it was about $400, which was nothing, she was going to take my current website and replicate it, but in a WordPress way. So then I could use it. Well, that happened, but then she disappeared. And I didn't have any of the login details. I didn't have access to anything in the back end. I couldn't change anything or do anything or get anyone else to do anything because she disappeared. And eventually, having got almost to the point, I think I gave her an ultimatum that she would have until a certain time that day for me to have the login details, or I was going to report her to, I don't know, the business police. I'm not sure where I was going to report her right now. That I can't think what that was. But thankfully, that came through. She sent the login details. I'll never know what happened. I don't know if she got unwell. That was kept on being what I was thinking is maybe she's really unwell and she's unable to do this work, which I could completely understand. Just send me the login details. Anyway, I never knew, but I got the login details and I was able to transfer that hosting of that website across to somebody else, and he still hosts my website to this day. And so that was a little bit of stressful. Oh, COVID. So here I am driving around to all of these homes all around the place, and knock on the door, COVID-19 arrives. Okay, so wow, that was a bit of a big thing for all of us. We all went through this. But one of the things that comes to mind is that saying, make a plan. I was probably one of the first in the community to just switch straight across to telehealth. And this little post here reminds me, oops, I've gone the wrong way. Whoop, sorry. That particular day, 24th of March, 2020, was my first full day of going from a fully mobile service to a fully telehealth service. And so, again, just people at the time were saying pivot. Everybody's pivoting. For me, it was make a plan. For me, it was to keep my family safe. I needed to make a plan. And that plan was I was going to telehealth. My families at the time were all incredibly relieved because I was one person who could potentially connect all of these people together with COVID-19 if I was to get it from one house and take it into all of these other houses. So they were really happy to jump on board. And yeah, we switched to telehealth pretty quickly. That time of only being at home really kind of closed in on me, and I went, okay, I think I need to start looking at getting a space outside of my home to do my work. And so I looked around, and as things started opening up, I went down to the business station in Gosnells, and I'd seen that they had rooms to rent. And so I was able to secure a little office space, 20 meters squared office space in the business station. And this photo here is my initial setup there in that little office. And I was so stoked. But the other thing that was happening in the background is that I was starting to get to the point where I was needing another speechie on the team. And I didn't want to have that person have to work out of my home. My home office is right in the middle of my home. And if I'm really honest, I didn't want to have breakfast dishes cleaned up before I got the kids out to the school. That was what it came down to. And so we got the office space at the business station. So that was in July of 2020. Not long after that, I had my first experience of taking on a new staff member. She came on board, and what I like to do when I have a new staff member come onto my team is we do a couple of weeks where they observe my sessions, or now that I've got a bigger team, some of the other speechy sessions. And so she came on board. She hadn't quite signed the contract yet, but she was doing all of the observation, and we were working through some of the aspects of the contract. I had developed her caseload, and I had booked clients in for her. And then at 4 o'clock on the Monday afternoon, when she was due to start with her first client at 9 a.m. on Tuesday morning, I got a text message from her saying that there were too many things in the contract that she couldn't sign and she wouldn't be starting with me the next day. Oh, it absolutely derailed me. And I had to suddenly contact all of these people who had now been waiting for speech services with me for ages and had now had the promise of speech and now had that taken away. And it was awful. I felt absolutely awful. One of the great things that did come about from that was I was at this point, I've been on the committee for the Private Speech Pathologists Association of WA. And not long before that, we had enlisted the services of a virtual assistant, Marie, at Empress of Order. And I think at that point, I may have even taken over as chairperson. So was working with Marie. Anyway, I called Marie in a big blubbering mess. And I said, is there any chance you can help me? Because now I don't have any time to do any of my admin. And now I have to do all of this other stuff. I have to try and fit in extra clients. And she said, I've got you. I've got you. And so she came on board to do 5 hours a week. And she was an angel, absolute savior. She already knew how to use Halixy, which was the practice management system I was using back then. And I gave her access to loads of things and she just dealt with it and she took the stress. Not all of the stress, but she took a huge amount of stress off me. And that was how I got into having admin support out of absolute pure desperation. And I only wish I had done it sooner. So for those of you thinking, should I or shouldn't I? You should. No questions asked, you should. Do it. Do it today. Only thing you take from today. Get admin sorted. It didn't take me, thankfully, it didn't take me too long to get the wonderful Charlotte to join me. And Charlotte came in with years of experience working in with autistic children. And she was just an absolute delight and really helped my ethos around having a team and putting procedures in place. I had a lot of procedures, but they were in my brain. And so she helped me get them out of my brain and actually write them down. And then not long after that, we also had the wonderful Jackie join our team as well. So that was a really great start. Well, you know, a bumpy start, but then we were in a bit of a flow until Charlotte announced her pregnancy. And then she went on maternity leave. I'm very happy for her that she had a beautiful baby girl. But at the same time, it wasn't that long after she started with me. So I was a bit disappointed that I was going to not have her for a period of time. What ended up happening, unfortunately, even more unfortunately for me, is that in that time, her and her family decided to move back to South Australia, which is where they were from. And so I lost her completely, whereas I thought she was just going on that leave. And then, you know, I think I could go on quite a bit about the ups and downs of staff. So I had Jess join our team at the beginning of 2002. And then but she really, really struggled with the high pressure in private practice and also she had some not really great positions before she started with me. And that really led to some quite severe burnout, despite us trying to mitigate that as much as possible. She was already in that spiral of burnout before she started with me. And so it was really, she needed to take some time out away from the profession after that. So another thing happened. This was a real positive. Well, actually, one day I walked into the business station and had a letter that attached to my door there stating that my rent was going up and that the previous manager of the place had charged me not enough rent. And so as of 2 weeks later, I was going to be paying gold prices for, to be honest, it wasn't a really very nice place. So I started looking elsewhere for other places, and that is what led to the massive decision to hire and fit out our own clinic. Um, in the process of doing that, my husband and I decided to move from a sole trader to a company, and we also decided to rebrand to Perth Hills Allied Health to start living out the dream that I've always had of going back to that amazing team that I had at Disability Services, of that multidisciplinary, transdisciplinary work. And so I decided to put it out into the world that I was going to be Perth Hills Allied Health and not just speech pathology. Shortly around the same sort of time, I was chatting to my neighbour, and I knew that she was studying her Bachelor of Art Therapy, but we were chatting, and I was thinking, oh man, I would so love to have art therapy as part of my provisions at my practice. And then NDIS decided that they would put art therapy on the schedule. Don't talk to me about what they're doing at the moment. We don't know. And so I asked Deb if she would like to come on board as an art therapist within our business. And thankfully, she said yes. And what an incredible addition to the allied health team to have art therapy. You know, I work so much with children who we do a lot of, they have a lot of difficulty with communicating their thoughts and their feelings. And then I would get them to draw or paint something, and then they would be able to talk about their picture, but they couldn't generate those ideas without that drawing or that painting. And so I really, really felt deeply that art therapy was going to be a discipline that would fit really well for the clients that we have in our clinic who have difficulty with communication. And I was absolutely on the money. And Deb has just been an incredible asset to our business, and all the clients that have her love her. And why wouldn't they? So in 2002, we opened the clinic. And yeah, I've got here that Jess left us just before that. So we opened, I took on the lease of the business, and then Jess resigned. So I was like, oh, what am I going to do? How am I going to fund the massive amount of rent with two very part-time? So Jackie was only working 3 days a week, and I was only working 3 days a week. That is not enough clinical hours in a day to cover the rent of this place. So that was really stressful. And then on top of that, by having this big clinic space, we also needed to now have admin, in-house admin. So we started out, we opened the clinic in October of 22 on the first day of term 4. We added a receptionist, and we added Deb, our art therapist. And I was like, yeah, this is going to be great because we can have this other discipline. This is going to bring money in. But I didn't think through how long it was going to take to build up her referral caseload, her referral base, and build up her caseload. So for the last part of 22, we were running, thankfully, Jackie agreed to increase her hours, and she took on a large number of Jess's clients, and I increased my hours so that we could cover, and we were scraping through, but I didn't anticipate also having to cover Deb's salary that wasn't getting covered with enough clients until, you know, quite a while later, and also our new in-house receptionist that was costing money without bringing anything in, but it was taking some time off me to some extent, but not probably as much as I would like. That wasn't Tara, our admin angel, who I was talking about earlier on. That was a different receptionist. So that was 2022, and we went off to Christmas break, and it was exhausting. And what ended up happening is that in order for me to pay my receptionist and pay Deb and Jackie, you know, the therapy team, as well as cover the rent, I decided not to take salary over that whole Christmas January period. and make sure that they were all paid and I was not. And that was just something, you know, those many hats of business. I made the decision to take on staff, and I made the decision to take on extra staff, really. And so that was the decision, that was the consequence, I suppose, of doing that. In hindsight, that was the right thing to do. It was the right way to go about it, because I have only gone up from there. And it was a bit of stress and a bit of hardship at that time. Thankfully, I've got a very supportive family and supportive husband, and we were able to, you know, that was okay for us, albeit really tight, but it was okay. But it was absolutely the right thing to do. Also, a positive that happened in that year was that I was an award winner. I won. I was announced as one of the top 50 small business leaders for 2022, and I still don't know why. That's that imposter syndrome that loves sitting on my shoulder. Like, why me? What have I done? But apparently, I was doing some good things. So where are we now? In 2023, I started hosting PD events, and we hosted M. Maney from NeuroWild for our first one, and then we ended up doing two. And that also marked the big shift to actively becoming neurodiversity affirming providers. We also hosted Kelly Marler and Ruth Feidler that year. And then from a staffing point of view, we sadly had to say goodbye to Jackie. And then we said goodbye to Karen as well, our receptionist. And then we welcomed Cicely and we welcomed Dom as two other speechies to our team. And we said goodbye to Dom. And then we welcomed Tara. So staffing, you know, ups and downs, ups and downs, ups and downs. Never a straight line, never a trajectory like this. It's just up and down all the time. So 2023 was all sorts of things, hosting of events that kind of just came by chance. One of the reasons why I started hosting the events was because I was so proud of my clinic. I'm still so proud of my clinic. It is beautiful and I love working in this space. But I was desperately trying to recruit. You know, Jackie was going to leave us and I had nobody else. I still had this big wait list, and I had people sitting on the wait list who were waiting for services after Jess had left as well. And now Jackie was going to leave, and I was desperate to try and figure out a different way of recruiting people. So I decided that I should host events in my clinic so people could come and look around and see the clinic. I have to say that none of the people who have come on board to work for me have attended those clinics and then decided, yes, this is what they want to do. I think the exposure all helps anyway. So that was why we decided to start hosting events. And then I discovered that it was a really good way to diversify my income source. And so in 2024, we officially launched the Adult Learning Zones, the zones for parents, therapists, and teachers. Within that, we host a monthly parent meetup for parents with neurodiverse, and I use the word neurodiverse on purpose, children. So, and that has been really well received by the parents who have come in. We've hosted a range of online and in-person events, and I was able to attend 2 conferences in 2024. A week after I launched the Adult Learning Zones, my dad was diagnosed with cancer, and that was it was really massive. Last year was filled with a lot of heartache and turmoil and stress and organising. So Dad spent a lot of time in hospital, and I'll be forever grateful that I'm in this role with the team around me that I have, because my team picked me up, my team kept me going, and I was I had the benefit of flexibility that I was able to be with Dad as much as possible in that time. And we're very much hoping that Dad isn't a frequent flyer of any hospitals this year. But to have had this team around me to deal with that, they just kept on going, doing their really great work whilst I was able to be with Mum and Dad. Mum also had her health issues in the December before that. Mum had a heart attack, so she was also recovering from that whilst we were working, whilst Dad was in hospital with his cancer treatment. And yet, through all of those hard things, and of course, parenting, my kids were having quite a hard time at school, which is not surprising given everything that was happening in the family home as well. The clinic was a safe place and it was a savior. My team, I can't tell you how thankful I am to the team that I have built here. They just carried me through all of that. And then we were super lucky to welcome Eve, our newest speechie, to our team in August last year. And so now we are currently a team of 5. And it's wonderful to have the buzz. There's so many kids coming in because we've got so many more people around us in the clinic. Of course, just because, you can't, every time you think you've got your head above water, something comes along. And then that's when NDIS decided to throw their weight at art therapy and pulling art therapy from the NDIS schedule. So thankfully, we had so many people sign the petition that they agreed to review, but we're waiting to hear what the results of that review is, and that will determine how much of an art therapy service that we can provide moving forward. But at this point in time, Deb has made the difficult decision to take a role elsewhere while still working for us 1 day a week, because we really she can't afford and I can't afford for NDIS to stop funding and then, she's out of a job completely. So that's something that we're dealing with at the moment. I'm really thankful to Deb for thinking outside the square and working out another solution. And I'm being eternally optimistic that NDIS is going to do this review and go, oh my goodness, this is what everyone's talking about, how amazing art therapy is. And of course, we're going to continue to fund it. Watch this space. I'm not sure. So where to from here? It's way over the time, and I'm sorry if I've kept you for longer than you should be, but where to from here? Like I say, art therapy, watch this space. Really hoping that we'll be back up to a full service really soon. With our adult learning zones, we've got an incredible lineup. We had our first workshop of the year on Friday with Dr. Bronwyn Sutton looking at neurodiversity affirming goal setting, and it was absolutely fabulous. What incredible learning that we got from that. We've got a whole bunch of incredible workshops coming up this year in all 3 of our zones. And the newest of the new things is our newest zone, which is the neuro-affirming zone. Now, all I can tell you right now is that it's called the neuro-affirming zone. And this is going to be a coaching program where I aim to help clinicians move from a space of feeling overwhelmed with neurodiversity affirming practice to a space of feeling confident with it. And that is going to be a bit of a focus. And watch this space because I think it might be launching soon, but I don't have an exact date for you, but that's coming up really soon. So I'm learning new things in that as well. I have a business coach who I'm working with who is helping me to work out how to run a coaching program, how to run automated systems in the back end. So just like when you booked in today, you booked in through the calendar and then you got a confirmation email and all that very cool stuff, all those emails that you got reminding you that it was happening and the links and all that. That is all stuff that I'm learning with my business coach at the moment. And so for something like a coaching program to work, there has to be a lot of back end work. And I'm absolutely thoroughly enjoying this different way of learning how to reach people. And my aim and my goal is to be able to support clinicians. The more clinicians I can support, the more families that get supported in neurodiversity affirming practice. And I think that's it from me. I'm okay to have another 10 minutes or so if anybody wants to ask some questions. I'm going to stop sharing and see if I can see your pretty faces. And if anybody would like to ask any questions, sorry, I do see Tanya's put one in the chat. Did you hire people straight as an employee or contracted? Also, how many waitlisted clients did you have waiting before thinking it was time to bring someone on board? Great questions, Tanya. Let's go with the second question first. How many waitlisted clients? When I got to the point where I could essentially fill my whole caseload twice, then I was like, okay, this is ridiculous. I need some help here. And I was looking at that list going, this is going to be 12 months or more before I can see these people. And the other thing is, if I'm really honest, I didn't think it would be hard to recruit speechies. Didn't think it would be hard at all. So I was kind of waiting until everything felt right. It didn't, even when I did decide to do it, it didn't all feel right. But at that point in time, I was waiting for all the ducks to be in a row. Little did I know that my ducks are always out back, swimming backstroke in various different directions. But that's what I was waiting for and thinking that there needed to be certain things in place. I am very glad that I got that office space put in place, that I had that before I had somebody come on board, because that really meant there was a workplace for them to go to. And my decision about employee versus contractor, I chose to go with an employee model rather than a contractor model. The reason I chose that is because partly I'm a really big control freak, and I wanted to have control over the systems that were used in my practice. I wanted to have control over back then, I didn't have the term neurodiversity affirming, but I was working in that line, and I wanted to have control over, this is something that I built up. I have built my business with this kind of out of the box thinking. One of the things I probably haven't mentioned is that a lot of my sessions I was taking place, I was never sitting at a table. I was doing artic work whilst running around a playground and having parents video me doing that. And then we were posting that to Facebook. So people knew that my type of practice wasn't a sit at the table type of practice, which was really, really different at that point in time. And so I wanted somebody who was going to join my team to think about doing it my way, which was different to the sit at the table kind of work. And I wanted to have that control. I keep going back to that word control. I promise I'm not a control. No, I am. I'm a control freak. And the other part of being of having employees was that I knew that in employee contract, it's very clear that there is leave and there is superannuation, and it's very clear what the situation is. Whereas with the contractor model, honestly, I got a little bit scared about I would need to have a really, really well-written contract so that the ATO wouldn't be coming at me going, actually, no, this is an employee contract and now you have to back pay this person with this amount of superannuation. And I just got really scared looking at the potential loopholes that I could get myself into trouble with the contractor situation compared to an employee situation just looked much more straightforward. I did make the decision, I did a whole big budget on that, and I made the decision that anybody who joined my team for 3 or more days a week would be able to go into a permanent contract. Anybody who wanted to join my team for 2 days or less would go into a casual contract. And that's worked really well, because when I looked at the numbers and went for 2 days a week for somebody to be on a permanent contract, I actually need to, they need to just be back to back with clients the whole time that they're here. And I'm not prepared to push them into burnout just so that I can cover their salary. And it's not actually even covering any of the rent. It's not covering any of the admin or anything else. Whereas on a casual contract, we've got a bit more flexibility with that.
My next question is, do you have someone that you recommend for building those contracts? Obviously, I wouldn't know where to even start with contract.
Yeah, so at that time, I used an HR consultant. So with that, I was still at the business station at that point in time. And so I used an HR consultant that was linked to the business station. So I had found an employee contract, and then I wrote it up, and then I sent it to her, and she went through it with a fine-tooth comb and suggested changes here and changes there. I could have done with an employment lawyer, but I didn't have the funds. I'm constantly not having enough money to do all of these things. So this was the way that I went about it. By having somebody in HR as well, I felt like they really do know all of the loopholes and all of the things that I needed to consider. As I mentioned, that first person, she didn't like the contract. And the thing that she didn't like about the contract was that I had a non-practicing clause in there where there was a geographical area that I didn't want somebody to practice in for a certain period of time after they'd left working here. Not practice, but own their own business. So they weren't able to contract or run a business within 20 kilometers of the base. And that's what she didn't like, that part of the contract. But I think those are kind of clauses that you'll find in most contracts. And it wasn't, you can't say you're not allowed to find a job in that zone. You can't say that, because that's somebody's livelihood that you're holding against them, and that would never stand in employee courts of law or anything like that. But I could say, that she couldn't contract, and I still have that clause in the contracts for all of my staff, is for a period of time after they finish working here, they can't run a business in 20 Ks, I think it is. Lizzie had to go, so I didn't get to say goodbye. But anybody else? Does anyone else have any questions? Oh, just unmute yourself, Peter.
There we go.
There you go.
I was just wondering, your proportion of clients, are they between NDIS and private paying? Yeah.
Sure. So at the moment, this actually, speech is different to art therapy. And this is one thing that probably would have been good to differentiate, and why art therapy is, such a struggle at the moment, is that of Deb's caseload, she only had one private paying fortnightly client, and all the rest of them were funded by NDIS. Okay. And art therapy is not, don't get Medicare rebates or anything like that as yet either. So, but from a speech perspective, at the moment, we're about 50-50.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good to know. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Any other questions? Any other thoughts or comments? Sasha, you've got something?
Yeah, this is not a question. Sorry, it's more of a comment. But I just wanted to say, thank you so much for sharing and being so honest, I guess, because it was nice hearing, that it can be really up and down, in your whole time of being a private practice owner, and everything that you've done, you've had so many high points, but then hearing how sometimes it does drop and get really stressful, and
Yeah, it really does. And anybody I speak to about running a private practice, I will never, you look at my Facebook, you will think, oh my gosh, it's just the land of milk and honey. It is the most amazing thing. But how do you take a photo of the really shit times?
Yeah.
You can't, right? And usually you're not even thinking about taking a photo at that time because you're paddling like a duck, just trying to keep your head above water. So I will always be upfront and honest. There are some really hard times. You will have them. It is part of running a business. It is, and the things will come at you when you least expect them. It'll come in the form of a client who decides to leave a shitty review of you on Google and there's nothing you can do about it. Or it might be like a friend of mine who runs a private practice in Brisbane. She had a client get disgruntled about her and report her to the ethics committee at SPA. And then she had to deal with all of that. And of course, she was completely cleared of any wrongdoing, but how stressful that she had to go through that whole big investigation. And, there's things that will come at you. And I guess if you can channel a bit of my make a plan philosophy when those things come flying at you, then, that'll get you through. It'll be hard, but it'll get you through.
No, thank you. Appreciate it. Because I think it's like when you're looking at everyone, like you said, it's like on the Facebook page, you see all the positives and how everything's going well. And you're like, oh God, like everybody's doing so well. And you're like, I feel like I'm the little duck with its legs. Like,
yeah, you know what? Even in looking at this, when I was doing some prep yesterday, and I had on my slides those like photos of welcome so-and-so to the team. I never once posted goodbye to any of those people.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't have any goodbye posts to any of these staff members that have left. It was just, evidently, I was annoyed.
Not so happy about that. Yeah. No, but yeah, thank you, Dee. Like, thank you, Di. Thank you so much, because it's just nice, like, you being so honest and hearing that it is a roller coaster.
Yeah. I wouldn't, those downtimes help you learn about things about yourself. That first one where I lost my first employee and needing to get a VA. Well, like I said here, if you guys don't have that in place, get that sorted, get started, because that really helped a huge amount. And do you know what I ended up with that is I was working until 10 instead of 11:30 at night. You know how good that was? Right now, though, I'm at the point where I don't work at night, ever. Yeah. So it's really shifted. I've got a much bigger business, but I'm not working at night. And so you can kind of, if I hadn't gone through those hard times, I wouldn't have hired that first admin. And then that wouldn't have led to where I am in terms of my mindset around having people help me with tasks that I'm not the best at. I still do a lot of the behind the scenes work myself. But, for example, with the automation of the new coaching program, I hired a VA who's going to be looking at creating templates for me and doing a lot of the automation that happens in the back end, so that that's not something I know a huge amount. So it's worthwhile for me to invest into somebody else doing that for us. It feels like a lot of money, but it's actually going to save me a lot of time in the long run.
Thanks, Di.
My pleasure. Any other questions or any other comments? Shannon, she says, is the extra stress worth hiring, let's say, one staff member if you don't have plans to grow? There's more to it. Sorry. If you don't have plans to continue growing, it's really hard to get speeches down in Mandarin, and I'm wondering if I'm better off just plodding along on my own, considering I don't necessarily have plans to grow to a bigger practice ongoing. Shannon, honestly, there have been many, many times when I have thought maybe I should have just stayed as me doing it on my own. There's pros and cons. It's not a decision that I can make for you. But bye, Paula. I think that there have been many times, I think, when I've been getting, sorry, I can't come in because I'm really sick messages first thing in the morning. And when you get that day in, day out for a while, it wears you down and you think, oh, geez, this is really hard. But then at the same time, if I hadn't had that team around me when Dad was really sick last year, my business would have failed. I would have come to a grinding halt, or I wouldn't have been able to spend time with Dad. Bye, Tanya. Thank you. Thank you for instigating all of this. So it's a hard one. It's a hard one to answer. Yeah. Anything else? Anyone else? Are we good to go? Awesome. Thank you guys for joining me today. Do keep an eye on your emails for that coaching program that is the neuroaffirming zone, which is going to be launched very soon. And I hope you guys will join me along on that journey to feeling confident with changing our mindsets and the ways that we work. And yeah, thank you.
Thanks so much, Di. Thanks so much
My
for putting
pleasure.
me on.
Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Di. That was amazing. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter.
Bye.
Bye.